Good evening. I'm so glad that you could be here tonight. It's a little crazy out there in the world, and it's starting to get very cold. I don't know where everybody is, but over here in New England and Rhode Island for me, and in around Mass, it's starting to get pretty chilly out there. So I'm glad everyone can come together tonight for a little community, maybe warm up a bit, thaw out a little bit. And we're here to celebrate the release of Wintered Over by Zeke Russell. So if you want to give some love in the chat for our featured reader, the author tonight, I would appreciate that. And yeah, honestly, I just want to get right into it. I want to let Zeke come up here and bless us with some pieces from this incredible work. And then afterwards, we'll come up, we'll have a little Q&A. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask the author, just be thinking of those and put them in the chat. I have some questions that I wrote up too, but I'd love to hear from you all as well. And with that, how about we get started? How does that sound? So let me bring up some bio here. Zeke Russell is a poet and housing advocate. He grew up in Central Maine, surrounded by artists, lumberjacks, and outlaws. He is clean and sober and lives in Boston with his partner Milo. His work has appeared in Wyvern Lit, Drunk in a Midnight Choir, Freezeray Poetry, Maps for Teeth, and on Button Poetry Online. So please, everybody, let's welcome Zeke.
Just want to test my sound a minute. Is that good?
Oh, yeah, go for it. You sound great.
Okay, great.
But do you want your video up? Yeah.
Okay. Here I am. MJ, should I just go? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no, sorry.
Okay.
I read your bio, so come on up.
Oh, yeah. My name is Zeke Russell. Some of you know that. I've known some of you for 20 plus years, as I see my family here. So I figured I wrote this book. It is a collection of poems I wrote over many years, and it is in two parts. I'm really excited that it exists, that it is in the world. I will say briefly that there's three people who I really wanted to read this book who can't on account of they died before I did it. And that would be my father, Dan Russell, my mentors, Jim Ramsey and Lee Sharkey. So the poem is in two parts. The book is in two parts, but I'll start with the prologue. Prologue 1, a benediction for the men who hurt us. The first time we fell through the ice, it was the giving way, not the sliding in, that mattered. When they pulled us out, we couldn't tell which fingers were living, the warm, soft, or the frozen. For years afterwards, we walked out past the measured, solid depth, waiting for that same entering, but there is nothing like the first time. Tomorrow, we will open our eyes, floating in the numbing all of it. When we look up, we will not be able to tell if we are waiting for rescue or if we have just been yanked out, seconds to spare. 2, the invocation. When our ghosts come home, we will not know what to do with them. There will be no room for all the figures who cram into our tiny houses, blocking the TV, filling the doorways, jamming into corners. When we are forced out through the back door, we will look back at the place we now see never had any space for us. Part 1, which takes place in Lowell, Massachusetts. There are strange things done, which is, of course, a reference to a Robert Service poem. Once, for a whole year, I was made entirely out of smoke, thick, black, curling smoke. House fire, tire fire, gunfire smoke. When I was made out of smoke, I ate only when no one was watching, drank black coffee and dark liquor. I met a woman that year and let the ashy particles of me curl into her lungs and hair. We drank whiskey and ink, listened to old songs from other planets. One day she said, if you leave yourself like that long enough, it'll stick. She was right, of course, but that wasn't enough to save me. So I am reading off my computer screen because I gave my last copy of my book away to a friend who had no money at my pre-release show last Wednesday. So foolish, I guess, but here we are. So there's a couple of series of poems in the book, and the first part of the series is called Elegy for a Barroom. And this is called Elegy for a Barroom Part 1, The Tavern by the Bridge. Was paved over 4 years ago to make way for a 24-hour CVS, but while it was standing, and I was still living in Lowell, Massachusetts, and drinking, I would go there. Once in the lunchroom at work, I mentioned that I planned to watch the Red Sox there. My coworker, your basic college bro turned middle school teacher, said, "Whoa, man, that place is like the Star Wars bar." I raised an eye, and he answered the question, "You know, do, 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 do." I said, "Yeah, I can see that, especially on karaoke night, but it's cheap and dark, and they have enough TVs that I can see the game I want." "But who," he said, "who goes with you to that place?" "Oh," I said, "nobody. Nobody does." Skip ahead. This is called The Way Out is Through January. This town is choking with ice, not like the ice of home, which might kill you, but will always shake your hand, let you know it knows you are there. This ice doesn't care about you. It covers the streets and fills the river, coats the sidewalk and perches on the overhangs waiting for prey. Last night you dreamt you dove down under the ice and found a lost temple whose inhabitants had thick fur and no eyes. They said they would give you the secret of breaking through if you would agree to leave your skin behind. When you woke, you could still see the marks of their thick fingers on the skin of your left arm. The radiator was stuck on high again, and you couldn't open the window. It was frozen in place. The ice just kept piling up. You begged, but it wouldn't listen. The radiator gurgled on outside. Winter wrapped its hand around the city and squeezed. This is Welcome to the City After Caring. This is the part of town you won't see unless you want to, and no one really wants to. We are not the kind of ghosts they make movies about. Here are the empty mills, the late night bodegas and all night laundries. Here are the crooked signposts and the broken bottles, the empty and the missing people. You can only get here when you don't want to get anywhere in particular. Our sidewalks are beautiful, though, a patchwork of brick and concrete, glass and iron. We all sit out on every stoop, waiting at the few that make it in. Some are lost and bewildered. Some know exactly where they are. And we see you every night. Some nights, you even see us. So this is a poem about about East Pond in Smithfield, Maine. And it is amalgam of a bunch of different nights. Anyway, buoyancy. The best swim of the year was always that first can't sleep hot night in June. School, a distant bank on either side, no street lights, no houses for half a mile. My brother would bring a flashlight to dodge roots and rocks on the path from the house to the lake. Laying on my back, looking up, swallowed in wet blue black of it, I could not tell you what held me. What force explained this miracle of floating? Sometimes I would point my face toward the unlit bottom and wonder what waited there. I've moved to a place where the streets rumble business, where the lights blaze on, orange soft glow all night long. A place where despair coils around my heart like an anchor chain. If I lean back today, I will almost feel the spreading pool underneath me, forcing my body upward. Here in the night that is almost dark, I will not turn my head toward the bottom to see who is down there reaching out the hands that steady me. Elegy for a Barroom, Part 3. There is a Part 2, but I skipped it because I can. Elegy for a Barroom, Part 3. It is January in Lowell. They do not plow the sidewalks, and I have walked a quarter of a mile in the middle of the road to drink Miller Genuine Draft and Wild Turkey 101 in Dick Messier's Centerville Cafe. Dick Messier, that has been explained to me, was a Lowell cop who either left or was forced off the job. He was briefly married to a woman named Rita, who at the moment of this story is the mayor of Lowell. I cannot even now explain why I think it is important to know this. I do not have a television. I'm here to watch the Patriots play the late game on a Sunday night. I am here to drink. I'm here to wonder why I am here. I am here to feel like I can be somewhere. I am neither drunk nor sober enough to understand the depths of my own self-pity. On the way back home, someone has snowblown a path through the sidewalk snowdrift. It goes almost the whole way to my tiny third floor walk-up with all utilities included. I will not understand what it means, this path. Tiny miracle of ease and safety. I do walk on it, though. That much, at least, I understand. So this one is weird. I mean, they're all weird in this section. Mostly I write kind of in like straightforward narrative, but these are like the weird poems about this weird time in my life that was hard to write about, except in weirdo metaphors. But here we are. The feats of strength. The night I drank the Merrimack, it was April, and I hadn't put the air conditioner in my window yet. It was so hot, I felt the fat of my belly go liquid like butter in a warm room, or the inside of an avocado when you leave it in the sun too long. I put on my shoes, some loose shorts, and an old shirt, and I just started walking. I sucked last night's rain off every leaf and pushed my face into the air for some kind of cool. When I got to the river, I crawled down the banks on my hands and knees, slithered over the mud and rocks, and pushed my face down in. When I started drinking, I didn't know what would happen, where it would end. But I was so empty and so hot, and it was there, cold and wet. With the water came the fish, the worms, and the dragonflies, then the wrappers and the milk cartons and the beer cans, then the gravel and the ash and the old granite of the bottom. When I had it all in my mouth, I tried to swallow. It took 3 tries, but I got it down. When I looked at the river, it was as if nothing had happened. It flowed along unchanged. I could feel it inside me, straining my stomach, sloshing against my ribs. I wondered what it was I had swallowed and when I would need it again. Elegy for a Barroom, Part 4. The Brass Lantern would sell you a Murphy Stout and a Jameson for like $5. It was quiet, and they usually played NPR over the speakers. They actively discouraged the UMass Lowell Bros and any bachelor party or pub crawl. When the Brass Lantern closed down, they turned it into a coffee house. No one went there. Then it was turned into a not coffee house, and no one went there. They turned that into a vegan, organic, whole food cafe and juice bar. To the shock of everyone who had ever had a beer and a shot at the Brass Lantern's massive and shabby bar, people went there. All hopes of a bar reemerging here were dashed. About 3 weeks after I got sober, I was back in Lowell, and I went to that organic cafe. I sat where the bar used to be. ate some combination of flaxseed, fennel, and ginger root. I tried as hard as I could to remember the brass lantern, the way the cracks in the bar would catch your fingertips, the beer and the bartenders, the burned out light bulbs. I thought I remembered it. Maybe not, though. Maybe I just made it something else, something I wanted to see. Just checking on my time, about halfway.
You're doing great.
Yeah, that's. I guess I'll do this. This is the this poem is called "The Space Intentionally Left Blank." When I did Poetry Slam, this is one of the poems I do a lot, but it's also super personal, so it's like a weird dichotomy. Anyway, it's got a epigraph by Peter Straub. The world is full of ghosts, and some of them are still people. There are some who believe that children are born soulless, that the body waits for the ghost to enter as the spirit waits for a space to be made. I thought about this just barely 4 years clean, the scars on my arms still visible. I held them out to hold my brand new niece. As my brother handed her to me, I thought, where is her ghost? Where is mine? Every addict is a ghost. Our lives are past tense, something that already happened. We still want the rest of our lives, but that want is somewhere we no longer fit, on the other side of the glass, a thing we can almost see, cannot touch. One time I remember my brother came into my apartment, found me half naked, passed out on the filthy floor. When he got me up, he asked, "How do you expect to live like this?" I said nothing, but the truth was and is, I never expected to live. I never thought my ghost would find a space it could live in. Even when you get clean, it's the same except for which side of the glass you're on. The before and during are soft light far behind you. Except sometimes you are forced to look at the things you were and are. Sometimes that haunted shadow of you sits down in the same room. So here is this man who I lied to and stole from, who I left in agony, stuffing his pain medication into my pocket, who I gifted with 100 small betrayals. He hands me this tiny child. I can't look at him. Why are you doing this to me? I whisper. How dare you not give up on me? And his daughter, my niece, opens her eyes as if to say, "Oh, you who are also a ghost, recently come home. Oh, fellow traveler, I see your tears, but listen. I have come a very long way to meet you. I am here. Make a space for me." Thus ends part 1. The baby in that poem is like 14 in 2 weeks, just for reference. So there's a series in the second half too, and it's called Half a Love Poem. I wrote the first line of this poem and then just like giggled for 10 minutes. So now I'll force you all to share my personal joke. Half a Love Poem number 1. The very best thing about New York City is that you can buy an entire watermelon at 3 a.m. And yes, the museums were great. And I love the way the cabs cruised down Avenue A while everyone on the sidewalks talked to each other and pointed out the things they like. Your hand in mine while we drank coffee out of unlabeled cardboard containers, but I think I still would have climbed on that bus, crushed into that seat for 4.5 hours to be here now. The hard grid of the fire escape pressing into my bare thighs below my boxers. The flesh of the watermelon, its juice, covering my mouth and chin, feet hanging over into the deep nothing between the buildings. I still do think that's the best thing about New York City. So this is a poem in the book. about how I started wearing like comfortable shoes. And it's a poem about my father, but I'm going to substitute this poem. And if you want to read the other one, buy the book. Hey, hey, it's my sales pitch. This poem is called Every Poet Has a Poem Called Inheritance. It's after Catherine Weiss. That's her line. 5 a.m. getting dressed, my fingers slow and blunt, made worse by lack of light, forced the buttons into their slots. My father, I remember, did this same thing at this time every day. Even after retirement, as if the early dark became the same as underwear or socks after all those early starts racing the sun to the job site. After the shirt, the pants, suspender straps up in place, 2 jackets, white cotton socks, shoes he would have approved of, soles as thick as a seawall. I see him now, laughing his wood stove warm winter sunrise laugh. It is the very last thing I put on before I leave. So this is 2 paired poems called The Lake Imagined and The Lake Real. This is The Lake Imagined. Far to the north, beyond the settled lands of your youth, with your clapboard churches and rust-red pickups, there is a lake. It is every lake and every dream you ever fell out of in the full dark of sleep. Only shreds of memory left. Only the lake itself. Its frozen breath surrounds you always when you arrive here. It is the last few days of a particularly cruel winter. You are dressed only in the cloth shirt that was your mother's favorite. Your fingers sing in the wet, hostile air. You do not know if you have been here a moment or always. Already the ice under you is solid as night. You feel the whipping wind rise. You do not know exactly how you get here or which part of you it is that is here. You have come to ask a question. It is the question you have asked your flesh for years. It is a question only something this cold and this ancient could answer. All at once, the place, this god of snapping branch, this region of an older world, answers the only way it can, with a wind that is already beginning to warm, that sweeps you back into your bed and into your body, an answer which means all things frozen melt. Ice will never not break when faced with the light of a coming spring. An answer which means winter ends, which means rise, traveler. Wake, pilgrim. The dawn comes, the world warms. Go to it while you are still alive, and you are alive now. Go. The Lake Real. And this is about Lake George in Canaan, Maine. In this story, there is no mother, no father, no hospital, no umbilical. In this story, I was scraped out of the granite by the teeth of a glacier. I grew out of this dirt like a diamond out of carbon, like the presence of this place squeezed metal cutter light catcher. I condensed out of air, wet and perfect. I poured out of the sky and filled this vessel. None of this is true, but it is all I have today. The sun burns the world. The lake is all I can see or want. Half a Love poem number 2. We left our friend's house on the back of your Honda Silverwing, looking for steamers or something, I don't remember. Anyway, no store had what we wanted. We bought steaks instead. Rode back through the late August evening, brighter than day in most other places, my arms around you, the skin of my wrists pressed against the leather of the jacket. We screamed against the oncoming wind. The hayfields blurred in our vision as you pushed the bike forward, straight toward the sun, uphill, into the wind. This is after my friend Stevie Sabrizi, who wrote a poem called "The Ghost Cars of Humford County." In their chapbook that was recently published, the title of that book is "Alone and Naked Inside of a Whale," which is worth the price of admission right there. But anyway, it's called "The Pickup Trucks of Somerset County." The trick was to lie flat out, so your body spread across the truck bed. Looking up, you'd see first the summer branches green with wide leaves, and then the country sky, all blue and gray and shot through with the light of stars and planet and nebulae, and moving as your friend's brother drove towards parties or swimming holes or bonfires and cold beer or a warm Pepsi, and your friends, all your friends, laughing and shouting and rolling dice in the middle of the night, but also just the truck itself, just your little vessel, rocket through the vast, empty rowboat on the deep, rippling river of night. So this is called A Sunday in October. It is for Lee Sharkey, who was my poetry mentor. She was a really brilliant poet. She won a lot of prizes. She published a lot of books, but she was also a member of this really like funky little artist community that my parents raised me in. And she was the poet in residence at my high school. So this is for her. It rained for a whole week, then stopped the day you died. I didn't know then that you were gone. The trees almost empty, leaves in drifts and wet huddles. I cleared the dead shadows of sunflowers from the garden, pulled the quilt down over the last shred of summer, stood in what was left and exhaled steam. 2 days later, someone told me you were dead, and it rained again. A deep, proud old country rain, sticking to my jacket in thick, clear drops. What a sharp axe is time. An empty cup. October cornfield. Cold air through an open window. Half a Love poem number 3. I am alone at the apple tree. The blackberries I ate in July are gone. Their thorns wrap around the tree like arms around the other body in the bed when the light first wakes you. The tree has never fruited before this year, and the apples hang there all shiny, green, and red. The promise of a sharp, biting mouthful hangs on the other side of this thick, sharp curtain. I managed to curl my fingers around just one apple, twist it free, bite off the entire right side, chew and swallow it down while the juice and blood and spit swirl together, stick to my skin on the back of my hand, run down my arm in fat pink streaks. We're almost there. I shall go to the big finish. Self-portrait as the major key remix of Smells Like Teen Spirit. Is this grace to live long enough to find melody in a dead man's voice? To feel a joy we never knew was ours? So I'll do 2 more. This is another poem about my dead father. This is hewers of wood and drawers of water. The day of my father's funeral, before we spread his ashes, I stood in the kitchen of the Athens Grange Hall, struggling with the pump. The old well still deep, full of cold water, but the pump itself groaned and gave nothing. My father's old friend Andy showed me how to wet the leathers with a gallon of Poland Spring we got from the Athens General Store. Slowly, the guts of the pump did their work, reached down into the old stone well, flowed free with each time my arms worked the handle up and down, washed the dust off the stainless steel of the counter. I cupped my hands, leaned in close, let it run down my face, filling my eyes over my lips and teeth, dripping through the old floorboards to the foundation, to the dirt itself, the stones, the dust, the ashes. This is the last poem. This summer I went swimming. Last week in the lap pool at the Malden YMCA, I learned how to swim, sputtering in the middle of the third lap, struggling to make it back to the shallow end where I could put my feet down and gulp a lungful of air. The chlorine splashed the inside of my nose and mouth. I slowed down, watched the old woman in the next lane, her even, measured strokes, the angle of her arms as they slipped out of the water and back in. I did 3 more laps with some of the ease and stillness I learned from her. Of course, I already knew how to swim. I grew up in rivers and lakes and ponds. Like I knew how not to drink, or how to care for the people who love me. I have been lucky in my life from time to time to discover how little I actually know. It is the only miracle I have ever known or needed. I imagine someday soon I will, in the middle of some crisis, take note of the person next to me, the gentle rise and fall of their chest, and I will, after all this time, learn to breathe.
Give it up for Zeke, everybody. What
Just
an
a guy.
incredible reading tonight.
Oh,
All the
all my
love in the world
friends.
right now for Zeke in the chat. Yes, hooray from the Catherine Weiss.
Ah,
We love it. That's amazing. So for folks who jumped on a little bit later, I'm MJ Malpiedi from Game Over Books. We're so happy that you're here for tonight's release reading of Wintered Over. We're going to do a little Q&A with Zeke now. So I have some questions that I've written up, but if anyone out there wants to ask something, please put your question in the chat. Would love to get to it. So yeah, let's chat a little bit. So one thing that struck out to me when I was reading the book Zeke was that there's a lot of music to your writing, and there's also a lot of music that is referenced throughout the book. You know, there's a
yeah.
bit of Kesha, there's some Bob Dylan, there's a little bit of Nirvana. And so I'm just a little curious if we could talk to us a bit about the musical influences that you had while writing this book.
Yeah, so there's a lot. Like my cradle songs were all Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Leonard Cohen. So there's that, and I really love punk rock. So that's in there a lot. And I think a lot of it comes from the stuff that I loved as a kid, and then what's missing though is there's a lot missing from the lull section, because that was such a dark time in my life. Most of the music is in the second half of the book, which is really the joy half.
Mhm.
And so that's where like it was all the stuff that kind of grounded me. Or and there was also a chapbook that I wrote and never produced called Portrait of the Artist as a YouTube channel, which had a lot of those like where the Nirvana poem comes from. Is from that. So there was a lot of that stuff where I like there's a poem to make it in called self-portrait sorry, a self-portrait as the Mountain Goats cover of The Boys Are Back in Town, which is like about the guys I grew up with in Central Maine, some of whom were on earlier, I saw. So
I love that.
yeah, so there's a lot of the stuff is just the stuff that I like growing up, or I think about when I'm writing. I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, that does. No, that was perfect. Yeah, there was just like I felt in the beginning, like I do see what you're saying about the music kind of gets it grows. There's more joy, there's more space for that as the book literally thaws out, right? Throughout the course
right.
of the but there was like a lot of blues for me at the beginning, or a lot of like folkiness that like came through, and that definitely ramped it. I loved it. Also a little follow-up to that. When is the release of Portrait of an Artist as a YouTube channel? When
I don't know if it'll ever happen, but maybe you know someone who operates a small press, and we can
I might know a couple people. I don't
who's talking about that.
can pull some strings here, Zeke. Um, so yeah, so kind of going off of this a little bit. So I really love that throughout the book, like we quite literally start in winter, right? We're in the
Yeah.
thick of it. We're in the thick of it with you in things from your memory. But over time, like we end up in summer,
Yeah.
right? We end up like thawed out and warmed, and in this place of actually being able to receive joy and able to receive like self forgiveness. And so I'm curious for you, like when was this point when you came to like poetry or writing as the thing, this little fire that could sustain this process for you?
Well, I mean,
This talk about this truth.
I've been writing a long time, and my dad was a poet, so I was always surrounded, and a playwright, so I was always surrounded by that. Um, growing up, but like for me, I didn't write for a while, and after I got clean, after I stopped using opiates, I started to write again, and that's really when poetry became the thing for me.
Mm.
And the ice thing has been there the whole time. Like that's always I've always got some ice going on. But yeah, I think writing became this thing that I did because I didn't know what to do with myself, and then um, writing became this thing that I could use to feel cool about myself. I could go to the open mic and everyone would ooh and ah, and I'd feel good about myself. Like, not that they always ooh and ah for me, uh, but then
Oh no,
I don't know.
I think there might have been a lot of going.
Nah, but then I found it was this way, like I could tell this story and I could kind of think my way through things. That's where I got to. But it's always been an outlet, and it was nice to just with the book to just make something that made sense, to make a story that made sense.
Yeah, and you did it very well.
Thank you.
It's an incredible book. So going a little bit on the ice here, the ice theme. I'm going to bring up your cover because I know that the book is
Oh,
so popular we can't even keep it in stock. So give me 1 second. Let me share.
Catherine did a tremendous job on the
Yes.
cover.
Catherine absolutely did a tremendous job. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of like the overall influences for the cover here, and a little bit about how you came up on your title. Like obviously there's a lot of heavy themes of winter, but I know there's a little bit more to that metaphorically. So if you could take us through your
So when I did a pre-release at the Boston Poetry Slam at the Cantab Lounge, and I got up there and I said the book is called Wintered Over. It's a metaphor, and then I just didn't say anything else. Like, that's the joke. Um, but like, not to mansplain, but when you certain vegetables like leeks or turnips, you let them stay in the ground over the winter, and when you dig them out, they're sweeter. So that's the whole reason I chose that, was that there's this, like, the poems at the beginning of the book don't
okay.
all take place in Lowell, but there was like fairly dark, lonely time in my life. But I wrote those poems after that time was over, right? After they had been in the ground a while. And I was able to get the sweetness out of that. The alternative title, which, I crowdsourced from my friends, as one does in the age of social media. The alternative title was Headlight on a Northbound Train, because a lot of these poems are about me missing Central Maine, about me missing home. But everybody thought that was a little too wordy, and that I would actually have to write a poem about the Grateful Dead, which I ended up doing later, but it didn't make it in the next book, I guess. But yeah, that's what I got to the metaphor, and that's like I was trying to get something that had that kind of journey or cycle. So that's how we put on Wintered Over. And originally I had taken this picture of a graveyard in Oakland, Maine, where there was in the middle of after a snowstorm, there was like a tree that was still blooming. And so that was the original idea. And Catherine mocked that up for me, very dutifully, tried to translate my vision, but then showed me this and was like, well, what about this? And I was like, oh yeah, that's definitely me waiting for a bus in Lowell, Mass, like really sad, but also like the book. So I fell in love with it immediately. And then there was a brief moment when we didn't think it would thumbnail well, but Catherine again like saved it and made it work.
Oh no, it definitely worked. It worked out
Yeah,
perfectly. I didn't know that about the like the farming
yeah,
aspect.
yeah.
That's even
That's
more beautiful. Obviously, I was taking the literally like being covered in snow kind of aspect, but
no, you winter something over, you like let it, and then
yeah.
you pull it out of the ground in the spring. It's done, like I said, it's done with a lot of root vegetables, but you can also grow winter wheat that way, or winter barley.
See that I'm not in agriculture.
Me neither, really. But most of that knowledge comes from my mom. I think my mom taught me about wintering things over. So
Love that. No, that's really great. So I want to focus a little bit on the elegies for the barroom poems, and because there was this like quality when when I was going through them. It almost felt like this might seem a little silly, but like this like Christmas caroly vibe of like going back to like Ghost of the Past, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And I was like wondering if there was any particular reason to like the chronology of these poems, right? Like,
well,
was it specifically like because you have these different taverns in each one that we're visiting, and I'm just wondering if there was, you know, any rhyme or reasoning, right? To how
yeah.
we
Well, I want to. I don't know. It's more thematic. Like they didn't all die. It's not the order in which they died.
sure.
But uh so when I lived in Lowell, like I got clean from opiates, but I still drank for a long time after that. And it wasn't until I moved away that I got sober. And then I was thinking about, you go back to the town. My god brother Josh lived there or close to it for many years, so I'd still go back. And then there was a reading that I still had connections to. That went back. I'd go back and like this bar. I was like, oh, I wonder if that bar I used to drink in is still there, and it was not. And so then I started to do that, and I was like, well, I know some that, like for instance, the Brass Lantern was gone. I think in 2002 or 2003 when I first moved there, but like when I went back and Molly K's was gone, and I went back and the tavern by the bridge was gone because they were bulldozing it for this like enormous 24 hours. That's how I started to write that, and then I sort of like tried to hang the story and like the end with the hopeful one, which is the one about the cafe and the snowstorm, but like not chronological, more thematic, I guess. But I'll talk about anything for. But yeah, so they were fun to write because it was like these like weird anecdotes about bars that no longer exist. And
No,
when I
I thought
realized when I started, I was like, oh my god, there's at least 4 of these. That's a
yeah.
sequence.
Uh, so speaking of lessons here, I'm just curious if you could talk to us a little bit about what you hope. And I ask this of like pretty much all the authors, because once your work's out there, you know, people are going to read it, interpret it, take different things from it as they will. And so I'm curious if there's anything specifically that you hope people really get from this collection of poems. Like what if there was a particular message or theme that they
Oh,
could take away?
I don't know.
That's also a fair answer.
Yeah, no, I think it's just I'm just trying to tell a story, right? Like I'm just trying to
Mhm.
tell this tale about this like goofy kid from Central Maine who like learned to chill out. It's really like I just took everything very seriously. And that first half, I'm like, oh, my life is so hard, right? That poem about the ice and the weird, like Lovecraftian kingdom, right? Like, it's just like I like lived in a like sort of like nice apartment that was kind of shabby and had a job, right? But I was like, my life is so dark, terrible. And then at the end, it's like, oh man, swimming laps is awesome, right? Like, so it's just about, I guess if it's anything, it's that life is long and
Yeah.
that a lot of cool shit happens along the way. Like, I don't know. That's but it is, and that you should visit Lowell, Massachusetts, if I impart nothing else to you.
I have not spent a lot of time in Lowell. Part of me was like, you know what? I
Is
gotta
I
visit
lived
this
there for a
place.
decade, and I'm really excited to go back there December 20th. I'm featuring at the Lowell open mic, which I curated for a while.
Yeah.
Um and which has really grown into this beautiful thing. And I'm really excited to go back and read all these weird, goofy, like silly metaphors about Lowell.
Love it. Uh, if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to throw them out. Otherwise, I think I've got like one more for you before we wrap up here. And there's a lot about uh ghosts or this idea of like trying to come back to yourself, trying to, be in possession of your house again, right? And I'm curious, we all have our own struggles. We all, in our own way, are these ghosts that are trying our best to stay in our homes here. And so I was just wondering, after all this time, after all this journeying, my friend, what advice do you have to your fellow ghosts out here that are trying to do this just the same thing, that are trying to just come back to this place of joy? What rituals helped you stay home?
Well, for me, writing, and quite honestly, playing Dungeons and Dragons. I joke,
Yes.
but I play D&D with the people, some of the people that I played with in junior high school, and most of the guys that I played with in high school, like, the Dawes song, "May all your favorite bands stay together," like, may all your high school D&D groups stay together, like that thread, like all these times when I felt lost, right? All these times when I was like living in Lowell in my like weird ass apartment, like, or struggling to get clean or stay clean, like, or struggling to get sober, like that was there. That was a through line for me, was home. And just like, I've done two like kind of goofy niche activities in my life, and I've been tabletop role-playing games and poetry slam, and like all the significant relationships in my life have come from those two things. Except for my partner, who I met online, but but yeah, like most of the significant relationships have come to that. So that's the rituals of like the weird like nooks and crannies of everyday life are the things that end up answering the big questions. I mean, you're like so concerned about the big questions, but it's this little like all the shit you do to keep sane in the moment that ends up mattering.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, we got two questions in from the audience just before
Okay.
the buzzer.
All
Just
right.
before the
The
buzzer. I love to
buzzer
see
kid.
it.
Buzzer beater kid.
So we got a question from Susanna Kitteridge, and we got a question from the Catherine Weiss.
The
Okay.
Catherine Weiss.
So Susanna asks, you mentioned Sharky, Catherine, Stevie. Let's talk about who are some of your other poetic influences.
Well, I mean, Dylan is there, and I think there's a lot of that. I think, I used to say that when I was 16, the only thing my mother and I agreed on was Bob Dylan. But, but many other things too, mostly musical influences. But I would say Mary Oliver is a really
Ooh, yeah.
formative poet for me. Like, and Seamus Heaney and Galway Cannell in terms of, and Sharon Olds in terms of working in plain speech, which like I don't do as an affectation. It's just because I don't know how to do anything else, right? Like, if I knew how to do, I really like wish, like I see my friends that have these beautiful, like delicate constructions of words, and I'm like, well, I'll never do that. As I said to my friend Sean Patrick Mulroy, who has a book out, Hated for the Gods on Button. You building chandeliers, I'm building bookcases, but those fuckers are sturdy. But yeah, I think, like I said, Mary Oliver, definitely Seamus Heaney and Mary Oliver, just in terms of how to take the specificity of place. And then James Joyce and Stephen King. James Joyce has that quote, in the particular is contained the universal. I write about Dublin because I feel that if someone can know Dublin, they can know the world. Like, so that's that like specificity of language. That's where it comes from. But I'd say Mary Oliver's my favorite. Oh God, who was it? There was a Polish poet, Wyclaf Herbert. His last name is Herbert. I've been reading him a lot. It's crazy. It's great.
Love it. And to bring us home here, so Catherine just wants to know, and this is the big question that we really all want to know.
This is the gimme because Catherine rather knows this. I've been talking to her about the project.
So are you working on anything new?
Yeah,
what's the thing for Zeke Russell?
I am writing a collection which is tentatively called, I'm writing to a plan for the first time, really. Like the first iteration of the first half of this book, which was called Milltown Ghosts, was like sort of to a plan, and then there's Portrait of the Artist. But those were Butcher Block is like, the way I can describe it is I put 2 quotes at the beginning of it as I work on it, and the 2 quotes are from the traditional parting glass, which is a man may drink and not be drunk, a man may fight and not be slain. That's quote 1. And quote 2 is time treats everybody like a fool by Warren Zevon. So it's about it's got a lot of my elegies in it, and I'm writing a lot of new elegies for it. And it's kitchen tables. It's about dead people and kitchen tables. And it's
what else do you need to hear?
It sort of fills in the spaces, like, because this book, like, part 1 is like I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, right? And then part 2 is like Zeke Russell today. And sort of Butcher Block is about that missing space. It's like Zeke is not sober, Zeke is sober. So then in the beginning, that's where Butcher Block fills in. I used to say that, Megan put that up. I used to say, my name is Zeke. I write short poems about dead people every time I went on the open mic.
I don't know if you just saw it.
Yeah, I did. That's why I said it. That's what I used to. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on. And the novel I've been trying to write for 15 years about a group of Boy Scouts caught in a monster apocalypse.
I'm sorry, what?
I write like a paragraph on that thing every year. So it's about my like complicated relationship with BSA, which was like really formative but also kind of terrible. So
I also had a complicated relationship with the BSA. So keep me posted. I would love to read.
Yeah, and then I'm doing I'm like a professor emeritus in the Boston poetry community, and trying to take my role as an elder seriously, although at 47, I don't know. But yeah, and I do some coaching with the team, with the slam team, and I don't know, and try to house the homeless. That's what I'm doing. That's my day job.
You're doing well. Well, that is our little release show, everyone.
Thank you so much
for being here. No, thank you. Thank you for this book and by putting this out in the world. It's an honor.
Thank you guys thank you for believing in it and believing in putting poetry out in general. Oh, whatever thousands of books you're putting out this year.
Yeah, quite literally. No, we love to do it, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And we hope you all enjoyed this little show tonight. If you haven't gotten your copy of the book, gameoverbooks.com, or hound a bookstore near you. Tell your local library, why don't you already have this? And yeah, we hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the holidays, however you celebrate them. And if you want to see this again, we will be putting this on the Game Over Books YouTube. It's probably been about the next week or so be on the lookout for that. But other than that, be well. Have a lovely evening, everyone. And that's all she wrote.